Hello. Today's guest didn't choose the psychic path, it chose her. And when the questions came, it was books that brought the answers. A psychic, truth digger, and lifelong student of practical spirituality, Ellae Elinwood never advertised her gifts, but people found her anyway. Her path opened not with fanfare, but with questions. Why me? Why do I see and feel these things? What am I supposed to do with this gift? The answers, she says, came through books from childhood favourites to rare metaphysical works. These books on her list shaped not only her understanding of the world, but her role in it. Ellae Elinwood joins me today to share the books that helped her embrace her psychic abilities, deepen her relationship with the earth, and trust the unseen. Ellae Elinwood, welcome.
That was beautiful. Thank you. And very accurate, I think.
So tell me, what criteria did you use to distill the list of books, and I'm sure you've read many, many, many life-changing books, down to just 10? How easy was that?
About actually doing the distilling?
Yeah.
Well, it was great. And I read that some of the other people that you have invited into this experience had the same. Life is moving so quickly right now, that it's easy to forget and just rush on and not really go back into the past in a way that allows you to feel your own personal path in a way that isn't trying to solve problems or going into the past to figure out why this or that happened. It's not therapeutic. It's a different perspective. So it was great fun for me to get to my first book and say, well, the little engine that could. I mean, there it is. That was the first one. I had others I liked, but that was the one that made a difference in the rest of my life.
Well, that book by Watty Piper was published in 1930. Why did it make such a big difference in your life?
I was born into a very scientific academic family, and there was a lot of it was a lot of confusion for me because I was born a mystic, and so if you're born a mystic, you have a certain set of skills that you develop. And it wasn't until I was in high school in a elevator with all that elevator music going on, and this voice said something about the man who had composed the music that I had been listening to in the elevator, and he said this was composed by mystic so and so, and I said, "Oh my gosh, that's me." So, being in a scientific environment as a born mystic, they're two very different brain functions. And there was no lack of love in the environment, but there was no one that really reflected back to me who I was. But that book gave me a centerpiece to work with. It didn't matter if I was a mystic and my dad was a well-known scientist and we had that all I had to do was just not give up. Just whatever happened, just move up to the top and get to the top and then know the other side. And I began to apply that, not like a little child mentally, but internally. And then it has helped me through my life. I've had big challenges in my life, and it's been extremely helpful.
Did your family know that you were a mystic?
Well, mysticism wasn't, no, it, the scientific community is a certain community. And it's actually an enclosed community. And and I love the way they think. You go until you have the answer, and then you keep gathering more information. The answer may change, it may not. But there's very little in that community that embraces the realities of mysticism. You know, the psychic world, the the invisible world, the understanding of why life is here, how to be in life. So there wasn't anything that really allowed me to get into that. It wasn't until I was in my early 40s, actually, that I moved into it. But without the little train, I would not have stubbornly stayed to who I was. I would have gotten off track.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
So it was just a life-changing book.
Well, yeah, I can remember reading folk tales from every country that I could, a whole series of books, folk tales from different countries, and they did it for me because I knew, some of these fairy tales,
Yeah.
these beings were real to me,
Yeah.
and I knew that, but nobody else did,
That's
around
right.
me. Yeah, so that
That's
these
right.
books are life changing and life affirming as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. Book number 2, Green Mansions by W.D. Hudson. First one, I think, published in 1904, but there are several books in this series, aren't there?
I was in my early teens and doing voracious reading, and I didn't realize how profound my connection to Earth was. I was lucky enough to be raised in a place where I could spend a lot of time on Earth walking and spending time in nature and showing up in time for dinner, that type of childhood. Um, this was the first book that really touched into the magic of nature that was expressed through Rima, the female player in the book. And at the end, she died. And I just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because of her journey and the lack of regard for her, which I translated internally as the lack of regard for Earth. So I think looking back and living in it as I did, as you gave me this opportunity, I think I really felt the challenge that Earth was going to go through, and that she was not going to be treated with the reverence that she deserves. And particularly in the United States, in the Western world, we are parasitic to Earth. I think maybe less than Europe, but in the United States, we're very parasitic. It's painful to watch.
Mm. And yet, when you're out there, in the wilds of some particular state with, these incredible vistas, and you look at the mountains and you look at the trees, and you have to think, you know what? You're going to win. The earth is going to win, ultimately, I think.
Yeah. It's just how far down we take her.
Yeah, yeah,
How if we don't get into a third world war, we'll manage this. If we get into a third world war, it's going to be really tough to you know, Earth will do her thing again.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's a tough time. So
Well,
Green Mansions just put that into my heart. That's who I am.
yeah. Mm. Book number 3 is a book that's very dear to my heart, Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl,
Yeah.
published in 1946. And this does come up pretty frequently on people's lists. And
I noticed
yeah,
that.
yeah, I understand why.
Me too.
Mm.
The part of the book that I love the most, that I retain because of my mystical orientation and nature, is the woman who got through the experience because her little cot that she shared with many others, there was a window next to it, and she looked out on a tree. And the tree, the vitality of the tree, the steadiness of the tree allowed her to maintain some steadiness in that environment. And I just found that so meaningful, that a tree could mean so much, and that she was able to draw so much from the tree. It wasn't just observing it; it was feeling that tree's love of living
Yes.
and how it was going to continue. And then that came into what we'll be talking about later, which was my first teacher, who said that trees are wiser than people because they know who they are.
Yeah, very, very true. Very true.
Yeah.
I think, the thing that stuck with me the most is that I find useful to pass on to others is the why. What is your why? If you find your why, then you know your path.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a
you
good
know,
one.
and I really took that one to heart.
That's
So
a good one.
number 4, it's a series, and I had a little bit of trouble finding out, when the first one was published. The Leap, Horn and Chi novel series by Tony Hillerman.
Say the name again.
The Leap, Horn and Chi novel series. That was on your list. No? It's a series about Native Americans.
Oh, okay.
Uh,
Leapfrog. Okay. I got it. Thank you. Yeah, Tony Hillerman is an American author who he's not living any longer, but at one point he wrote a lot of books about the Native American experience and being raised the way I had been raised in a community of people that we were at the end of the Underground Railroad, so there was a lot of African American experience I grew up with, but we didn't have anything to do with indigenous people. And I realized that through this book, that at a human level, they were just like human beings. But at a spiritual level, they were completely connected to Earth. And that's what gave me more understanding of how to live a life that way. And so in the morning, I get up and I sing a song to the spirit world, and it grounds me. And I love the people for who they are and how Earth has given them that strength to endure the miserable experiences that we put them through. And they're still a strong nation of people. And so Tony's book, that was the first one that started me. And then I just read every single book. And now his daughter is also writing books. So that Tony, I'm sorry.
about Native Americans, the
Yeah,
daughter.
yeah.
So do you know what his connection with them was?
He lived in Arizona, I think, and he just came to respect them. And he was a natural author. And so he made up these stories. They were murder mystery stories, but they were all murder mystery stories, absolutely entwined with how Native Americans did their life and what their priorities were. And one of the problems I have still with writing about Native Americans and others is you peer into the experience and describe it. Well, that's not the experience. You have to be inside, you have to live the experience to know it. And we all know that with our lifetimes. It's trying to describe things in our lives to others. They, it, it's not the same as just being in it with somebody who's already done it. And because he entwined them in the story, it wasn't like peering into it anymore. It was like being in the experience. All
Mm,
of his books were like that.
yeah, that's the sign of a good writer. Yeah.
Yeah,
Book number 5, The Boy Who Saw True by Cyril Scott, published in 1953.
that was a big one. This was before I didn't open up psychically for a while. I just kind of bumbled around trying to figure out what my path was. And this was an important book for me because it was a true story. He's English. The book may still be published, but it's certainly not published in this country. And he just saw the invisible world. He saw angels sitting in the clouds. He had a close relationship to it, and he wasn't what we would define as mentally ill in some way or distance. He had this gift. It was accepted, and the book was written in such a simple way that I was fascinated by it. And now I recognize it was because it helped me begin to understand what I had buried inside of me, was this connection to the invisible world. And it it helped me begin to regain who I really am.
Mm. It's wonderful when a book like that gives you a piece of yourself and gives you permission to recognize a piece of yourself and accept it.
Mm-hmm. It is, and we're all given a gift, and often the gift is not something that's part of the cultural pattern that we've chosen to live in. So there comes a time in many people's lives, do I move into what the culture wants, or do I move with my gift? And and the gift, it's so important to at least allow the gift to be a part of your life. And that book really let me understand that.
Mm. Book number 6 is a bit different. Yoga for Today by Clara Spring, published in
Mhm.
1959. Now, I know that you have taught various yoga, Qigong, I think, Tai Chi, um, various different modalities over the years. When did you come across this book and why is it on your list?
Well, I was in high school and I was tall and a little awkward and living in Claremont, California. And my mom was a part of a yoga class and she said, why don't you come to yoga? And so I came in and I was natural in doing it. And Clara was in her mid 50s. She was supple and she was like every woman would want to be as she gets older. And she said to me at the end of class, "You have a beautiful body, use it well." And I was so desperate to have something that I could relate to personally that I could move forward into that I thought, oh, okay, I'll do that. And so I started just doing more yoga. And over time, I found out that one of my writings is about earthful yoga, is one word, that yoga is a profound exercise. And if you maintain your connection to earth when you're doing the exercise, you become an antenna between heaven and earth, which is what we call enlightenment. It's just was amazing. It started me on a wonderful path. I taught it for a long time, and then I moved on.
And you said that she was the first woman to come from India and teach in a Western way.
She was. So
Mm.
the book is interesting from that perspective, that she came with a much more traditional look at yoga
Mm.
than is often taught.
Do you still practice it yourself?
I do. I've
Yeah.
become, actually, I prefer now, I need exercises that ground me because of the psychic work. And what grounds me better is rowing.
Rowing.
So I row, and that's a good grounding exercise. But yoga, I turn to it a lot.
Mm. Yeah. Book number 7, Life in the World Hereafter, The Journey Continues by Greg Tiffin, published in 2006, who was one of the 3 wonderful teachers that you had.
That's right. I had 3 wonderful teachers, and Greg was the first. Um, I opened up because I had a guy. I was doing massage and picking up information from people when I was massaging them. And so when someone would come in for a massage, I would tell them that that was what I did and did they want the information. And they usually said yes. And then I had a man call me a couple of weeks after his massage and he said, you call yourself a masseuse, but you're really a psychic. You gave me all this information about my parents. They came to visit and I transformed our relationship. So I began to have people close to me and I would touch them and just tell them all the information I was getting until my hands got a little arthritic from all the different energies moving in. So I was doing other things, but kind of doing this on the side, but really deeply needing a teacher. And Greg was really an example of when you're ready, the teacher comes. And he was not New Age. He Greg understood who he served. He didn't serve his own sexuality, as you often find, I find, with male teachers. As good as they are, that sexual energy comes up and starts to take over. Greg understood who he served, and I could feel it in him. And for that reason, I started trusting him. I'd been staying away from many of the other New Age teachers because I felt they were so conflicted in why they were doing it. So he was pristine, and it was like going home, actually. This was what I had been looking for. He'd been trained in Tibet. He had started in a life quite dissimilar from what he was working with. He had information that was, to me, so accurate and helped me so much with my readings. He's gone now, but he could see absolutely the past lifetime that a person had. So I would have a client come and I would offer to get their past life from Greg, or they could go and get it themselves and bring it into session. Didn't matter. I would start working with them psychically and we would get the connection and they would tell me about their past life. And it was like they opened up and I walked into a history book. It was just amazing. So he wrote several books, and Life in the World Hereafter is a really clear expression of what happens when we leave the planet, how it matters which way we leave the planet, what happens if we leave the planet in a way that's not in harmony with the school. It's very, very illuminating. And what I like about it with Greg's work is one of the problems with the New Age is that it wants everything to be fine. It's not really nuts and bolts. You don't go down into the huge hardships of life, which I've had. So Greg's work really helped me take tools into the tremendous challenges I had and see where metaphysics worked and where it was fantasy.
Yeah, and that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? Because so many people think, in the spiritual arena, it's all about love and light and positivity, and you don't look at the shadow.
Mm-mm,
That's not life.
mm-mm.
And
It's
we come here to have an experience.
it's there are real reasons for it.
Mm. And you said you talked about one of his other books, The Story of Infinity. What is that about?
The story of infinity is, he said that the book of Genesis was written by a mystic in a couch language, and that it carries in it really the rules for the school. Like sound is what makes life. Anything you say lives in the flow of life forever, and that's what creates the flow of life is sound, and it's something similar in Genesis. So he takes that and makes it so clear, and then talks about true manifesting. If you're trying to manifest, this is how you do it, working within the laws of the school. So the thing I loved the most about Greg was he was nuts and bolts. And this is another nuts and bolts. And I believe it's whether we like it or not, this is the way the school runs. And if you look at faiths, like people who commit suicide, it's a very tricky way because you're not staying in timing. And if you look at faith, the faith, you can see they're all against it, not to do that. So there are certain guidelines in the book that Greg has and the way he has taught, and he didn't particularly talk about suicide in that, that give you a sense of, well, this is the way it really is. So in accepting this, I make better choices and my life aligns in a way that I'm not able to get it to align basically with timing. Our job is to get our life to align with timing.
Mm. How did he come into your life?
I'm sorry.
How did he come into your life?
He a student, or I set up. I was living in San Diego, Del Mar, California, and I hadn't advertised for the reasons that I mentioned, and but people started finding me, And one of them was from Greg. And then I started getting people from Greg. And it just made my psychic so much easier. There was something about the work with him that clarified for them why they were here. And that was so I got a hold of him. And Bonnie, the woman that he was with, said, "Oh my gosh, Ellae Elinwood, who are you? We've had so many people come from you." So Greg trained me, and there you are. It was
Amazing.
great. When you're ready, the teacher comes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Number 8, the Nag Hammadi Library, and the translator that you prefer is James Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's some books that you read that just so fill you with the wonder of another space. And this is one. It just was a wonderful, wonderful book that I would suggest to anyone.
Tell me, and I haven't read it, sorry to say, there are too many books on my list. You say that your favourite is Thunder, Perfect Mind, Center, Perfect Mind, an expression of the beingness of every woman on the planet. What does that mean?
Well, the Gnostic Gospels are they're it's the Dead Sea Scrolls translated. A woman named Eileen Pagels also wrote about the book, and that was how I got introduced to Gnostic Gospels, and also then found Thunder Perfect Mind. It's a channeling from what I would say is the diva of women, so who belong, and so it just says, I am the first and the last. I am the scorned one and the holy one. It just describes what it is to be a woman and women. It's one of my favorites, and you can get it easily. You can just go on the internet and type in Thunder Perfect Mind, and it'll come up for you. A lot of it sort of wanders and meanders the way you find with metaphysical people. The messages is in the rhythm more than in the words. But the beginning of Thunder Perfect Mind is a true expression of what it means to be feminine here and all the different roles that we take on as women. I would recommend it to anybody. There's also the Book of Thomas that's there, which is a wonderful book. The disciples asked Jesus, "How can I be like you?" It's what alms, pray, what do we do? And he said, "Don't do what you hate and don't tell lies." And that's in the Book of Thomas. So there's gems. They're just really gems, core gems in there before all the spiritual information that's covered in the Gnostic got lost into translators and systems that wanted it to work and, got sculpted in different ways. This is kind of the bottom line or the beginning of what certain types of faith, what they came from.
Mm. Book number 9, What Wants to Be Known, by Paul Goodberg, published in 2019.
Yeah. What wants to be known is that several offerings by my third teacher, who was raised, his name is Paul Goodberg. He's quite elderly now and doesn't work with people the way he used to in healing. He had a remarkable capacity to heal. Now he is putting a lot of energy into his website instead. And but in this book, What Wants to Be Known, he talks about his familiarity with the invisible world. He works in the spirit world, He's not indigenous, but he was raised by a grandmother who healed with her eyes and studied with some of the best, not famous, but best indigenous healers, and has not advertised himself broadly. He just waits for people to be referred to him and shares in his silence, in what comes from his body, the healing that he is capable of giving. And it's a silent healing. It has to do with energies. It has to do with the resonances. It has to do with the person's ability to receive that type of healing. He's helped tremendous people. And what wants to be known is a book about how you can begin to open up to that world. He said, this is a very different world, the invisible world that surrounds us, but it wants to be known. It wants to be known. So how do you get to know it? And that's what this book is about.
Another one to go on my list. So book number 10, it's actually 2 books, and I've allowed that because I am so pleased, so pleased to see. Certainly the first book. The second one I wasn't aware of. Nancy Ann Tappe, who, although I never met her work has had a big influence on my life. And of course, she wrote Your Life Through Colour, and she became famous as the person who first recognized the indigo children that were coming onto the planet. And the second book is A Quiet Storm. So tell us, and I know that you knew Nancy, so tell us a little bit about Nancy and tell us why these books are on your list.
Well, Nancy, as you know, was a remarkable woman. she was gifted with seeing all the layers of the aura and then could really describe to you, kind of feed back to you how she saw you, which enabled people to expand beyond the tiny part of us that we bring into life and begin to understand themselves from a larger perspective. Her wisdom was just profound. She was the first woman to see the indigo ray, which is now such a popular color, and because it's the color that's moving us forward. And her first book, Understanding Your Life Through Color, which has now gotten quite expensive but is still available, was her abilities sort of translated into words so that you could start to understand the impact of color and also the impact on yourself. So with me, Nancy understood me. She saw that she actually told me I was going to open up psychically before I did. I had gone to her as people often do. You know, you go to the people that show you that can be mentors for you. And I went to see her on for just a personal thing. And she said, I see you opening up psychically. And just remember that this is being given to you as a gift, and you don't have to do it or give it to anybody. You're going to be asked to do some very difficult things, and the psychic will help you. And she was right. And as the difficult things hit the fan, Nancy would be there. And then when she passed, her words would be with me. She was remarkable. And so every gift that she gives, she was very humble and really didn't produce much for us to read as her legacy. But these 2 books, Knowing Your Life Through Color and the book about the indigos, Quiet Storm.
What did she say in The Quiet Storm? What was the message?
The message in Quiet Storm is that we are now in we're not in a renaissance. We are in an enormous change for humanity. We are learning from, and this may be the most important thing I say through the whole thing, we are learning to move from doing unto others as you want them to do unto you. Learning that that if you can get people to be more loving, you're successful. If you can terrify somebody, you're successful. Relying on the outer world to understand about ourselves. We're moving from that now to give the quality person, the quality inside of you that you choose to give to this situation and then learn from it. And that's because we have to learn how to get along with each other. And the only way we're going to learn how to do that is through having autonomy, where we draw from ourselves to give to life. Much like you, Sandie, you've set up something here where you draw from yourself to give life to others, presenting who we are and what our work is. And that contributes to the world peace because we're not trying to control the world. And as you do that, the steps towards that are wanting first to understand if this is going to work or not, to exceed, to get a common ground. So you look for a common ground, then you develop reciprocal ways of communicating. And then you let relationships develop on reciprocal communication. So no one's first, no one's second. You're relating to one another as individuals, and it has to be something that both people want. And then there's a feeling of understanding that comes over you that obliterates the need to control. And that's what Nancy taught me, and Greg.
Many people think about Nancy in light of the Indigo Kids only. And when that phenomenon really, took off, I mean, it's a bit like the telepathy tapes today. Everybody's talking about it. Everybody was talking about, when I first arrived in America, the Indigo Kids, and everybody was writing about them. And then you get all of these, kind of mythologies that grow up around it about who these kids are and what they're here to do. And, and people tend to forget, that they're also, at that point, children, mostly, who've got to navigate a world that is changing and changing drastically and isn't wired necessarily, to understand them. And I think that's what's happening with the telepathy tapes now. Everybody's talking about, but they're almost talking about these kids as if they're not kids, as if they're little angels or there's something else, when in fact, they're human beings. Right now, they're human beings. And they're here, just as the Indigos were, to help bring about change. And I think it's a shame that Nancy seems to be known by many people just for that, just for the Indigos, because her work was so much larger than that.
Much, much larger.
Yeah.
Yeah, she came from a lifetime where she was confined into work. And so she had problems extending herself in this lifetime. She really relied on other people to do it. So her legacy is limited, unfortunately. But what's there is gold.
Yeah. Very, very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's your list. Now let's talk about you. I know you said you grew up in, very scientifically oriented family, but you also have said that you credit your Irish ancestral genes with gifting you with the skills that you have. Um, how did the Irish ancestral genes play out in the rest of your family?
Um, how did it play out in the rest of my family? That's the question. Well, my mother definitely carried this, but I evolved my grandmother, which was my father's mother. And Dad was very smart and left alone as a young child, so he turned to reading instead of more what might have happened if he'd been closer to my grandmother, who was working a lot. She was a single woman. So he carried those qualities, but they didn't really come into the family. And it was a time when the woman really capitulated to the husband. And so mother, who was a natural intuitive, just didn't do anything about it. She actually was worried for me. What would happen to me if I made a life like this? Um, So that was it.
Was your mother still alive when you really, opened up and became psychic and started, this was your profession? How did she feel about that?
You're just such an unusual woman. She went to Hawaii once. I was doing a workshop with two guys in Hawaii and Madame Pele and the whole thing. And she was there. She had a dream of Madame Pele, and she was comfortable with herself. But it was a time when she could never have done that and have Dad be as successful as he was. And he became a very successful scientist. Without her support, it wouldn't have happened.
Mm. You've done so many things in your life. You're a teacher of healing arts. You've been a frequent guest on television and radio. You've studied numerology and written a book about it. And you worked with these amazing teachers and hundreds, thousands of clients, and you've written books and magazine articles. And your books, is quite a diverse, kind of library there. You've got Earth is Your Sweet Spot, A Woman's Guide to Living Beautifully, Earth School 101, a guidebook which is now being prepared for publication. You also wrote a book, Stay Young with Tai Chi, that I can imagine every woman is interested in. Of all the books you've written, what would you say? And I know they're like our children. It's impossible to choose between them, but is there one that is a little bit closer to your heart than others?
Well, each one. My first book was on face exercise because I think that women have a tremendous gift to be inspirational to one another and to men, and that we can affect the planet positively if we carry our femininity with pride and happiness in however we express it. So face exercise was important to me for that reason. Most of the books that you mentioned, I wrote after my daughter, who had two young children, and I stepped in to raise the children with her husband. And it was a tragic death. Um, those books I wrote because the family needed the money. And so I wrote them for the book companies that sell large amounts of books. The book that I wrote for myself was the one that you spoke of, Earth is Your Sweet Spot, A Woman's Guide to a Beautiful Life. And that came from Greg. And that completely changed my way of looking at women from a grounded, ancient perspective, who we are. And then the one I've written now is Earth School 101, a guidebook, is the one I'm the most attached to now, because I think those of us that orient into practical mysticism, we're intuitive, we're sensitive, we feel things that are deeply personal, that are meant for us. Some of us look at our life through our forehead as much as through our eyes. There's not much out there to help us orient into Earth and the tremendous gifts that she holds for us. Basically, we're parasitic. So the book about Earth School 101, but also Earth is Your Sweet Spot, are books that talk about how to be here in a way that's aligned with who you are as a person. So those two right now are the ones that I'm the most excited about. I've also written some magazine articles about Earthful Yoga, which is yoga comes from an ancient culture where the people were so embedded in earth they couldn't imagine living without it. And yoga was developed to reach up and out. But we are not grounded. The Western world is not grounded. So yoga is all about going up instead of being connected down. And half of what yoga is about gets lost in that. So the article is just about how that came about, the wonderful gift of receiving all this information in the 60s, and now what needs to be done to really be able to receive what the gift is there. So they're all important to me.
Mm. Yeah. Do you have a website? I couldn't find one.
I'm sorry, I have hearing problems. You have to say that again.
Do you have a website?
I'm going to have a website. We're just now putting it out. It's connectionswithearth.com.
Okay, that's good because I couldn't find one.
And it has the 3 books in it. I don't market myself, so I'm not going to talk about my psychic work. I still am very committed to having that be word of mouth.
Mm,
I think it's the proper use of the psychic. Otherwise, you get your ego involved in it's hard to PR yourself and not get your ego involved.
that's why,
So that's not going to be in there. It's going to be the books.
yeah, that's why public relations exists.
Mm-hmm.
Because people shouldn't be PRing themselves.
Yeah.
So you wrote a book called Timeless Face, 30 Days to a Younger You through face reading, acupressure and toning. Acupressure, I understand. I've
Yeah.
seen books with that. Face reading, I'm not so clear on. And how toning comes into that, I'm very intrigued to know more.
Well, the work that I did in San Diego, the psychic work, a lot I did with my eyes closed, but mostly I was looking at people and their faces would change so much when I was talking about what I was sensing that I found it really interesting. And then Greg talked about how inspirational women could be, that a man's day can be completely improved by one woman just smiling at him, that there's a way that women have not stepped forward into our femininity, into what we have to give. And actually, the karma of the planet belongs to us in female lifetimes, not male, in female lifetimes. So this this all sort of constellated together with me deciding that I was going to write a book that would help women. Basically, the bottom line of the book is save your face. But I added in other things that would make it more appealing. The face exercise and the Chinese movement and then acupuncture points, but none of them are necessary. They're all there to restore and bring back the musculature in the face. A lot of women exercise, but they don't exercise their face. So, for instance, if you have high cheekbones, like you do, you have high cheekbones, they just go 10 or 15 times a day, and those muscles build up. Actually, that reminded me, I went on a book tour to Canada, and they thought the Canadian paper thought the book was so hilarious. They did a center section in the Sunday paper with nothing but face exercises from the book.
I think that's, yes.
So,
wonderful.
I mean, I'm 83. I have never had a facelift. I just use products on my face to keep my skin toned, and I use face exercise. And I think as a woman, I just wanted to keep going with what I had. It's
Yeah.
not a strong, I don't need to attract people. It's my relationship to myself. I want to keep going with what I have. And so that's why I wrote the book.
So if it's gone, can you get it back?
Say that again?
If it's gone, can you get it back?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Quickly?
Also, the nose changes as we get older.
Yeah.
So you can,
Wow.
I dare you to do it.
Now? No, I don't think so. I'll do it privately. But yeah, I mean, as any
So
woman,
Timeless Face was the most fun to write. That was also before my daughter died, so it
yeah,
was a fun book to write.
yeah, I'm going to do this because I've definitely noticed that my high cheekbones are not so high anymore.
Well, some of that can be handled with good product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
But face exercise is really, really helpful.
What about the toning?
What about toning?
Yeah. How does that help?
That's what you're doing. You're toning it.
Oh, I thought toning as in sound toning.
No,
Oh, you're talking
no,
about,
toning
yes,
the
toning
muscles
as in
underneath.
toning them up. Okay. I misunderstood that. I thought that sound came into it as well, because that really would be interesting. Um, but you've studied so many things. What gave you the most pleasure?
Well, I think people who, I think it's just because I'm curious. Curious about ways of life and ways of being. And it's the value of being a little bit lost in the beginning of the life. Now, that's treacherous now because of the problem we have with drugs, which
Mm,
is really causing a big problem with the indigo generation.
yeah.
Um, but if you can pass it, somehow get through that as a young person now, and just let your curiosity, that feeling of being, that quote, all who wander are not lost, just having experiences. Now I find that with my psychic, I am completely non judgmental about people, partly because I can see clearly where they come from, but also I've had so many experiences and done so many things. And then we traveled as a family to Africa, and I lived in England for a year. And so I just think it's made me a better person.
And of course, you've got, the knowledge of numerology, which tells you a lot about people too,
Yeah. Yeah. Numerology is fascinating.
isn't it?
It's, I mean, just in its simplest form, someone can tell me their birthday, and I can tell them the core reason why they're here. It's like mine is a 3, which means I'm just supposed to have fun. Even in my big challenges, I'm supposed to learn pleasure and how to have fun. Um, Someone who's a 14, they're learning here. They're here as an individual to structure their lives so that they can be successful because it adds up to 5. It's not complex.
Are you taking that from the birth day, or are you taking that from the name?
And if, or you can take the month, the day, and the year and add it all up. But you can also just take the day and the month and get a lot of information right there. Numerology is fascinating.
Mm. Yeah, I've kind of studied it quite a bit, but not
Oh,
I
have
would say
you?
as a professional. I've played with it a lot. Yeah, yeah.
There's a
Um,
wonderful numerologist in this country. I'll give you her name.
Please do.
Yeah.
Had a wonderful numerologist friend who used to write for my magazine, but she passed a few years ago. And
Uh,
it's interesting because, I've been fascinated by people changing their name or taking a letter and altering that and
yeah,
then watching their life change.
yeah.
And, we had a rock star in England who actually had two bouts of fame with two different names. So he was famous, I think, in the 70s as this person. And then in the 90s, he was famous as that person. And I often used to wonder, the names were quite different, had he used numerology. But there's a rumor that Barbara Streisand did. She took one of the A's out of her name.
Yeah.
I've read so many pieces about people who've changed. And, I was known as Sandra Sedgbeer for many years. And my books, everything professionally was all Sandra. And I didn't like the name Sandie until I came to America and something changed. And I started using Sandie with an IE. And it was a whole different thing. And I once said to a numerologist, should I be settling on one or the other? And she said, no, for you, she said, I think you could use both, however you please. So, yeah,
Oh.
but mostly I use Sandie and I feel different as Sandie than I do as Sandra.
Well, you're at the core of it. You might be interested to know that Greg's tool was numerology. And he said that feng shui is numerology.
Yeah.
that the art of placement is all numerology. And he talked about how in Ireland, which is such a faithful country to ancient ways, that you can act, there were people who could actually bring energy in and change this vibration of the space using feng shui, or in Ireland it was something different. And that was how the circles of faith were created there. That's what Stonehenge was about, but no longer is that coming down, so it doesn't have the same quality. But numerology is amazing.
Yeah. I've used feng shui and I've changed
I bet you
situations
have. Yeah,
using feng shui. Yes.
yeah.
So, yeah, but I never connected the two. What sign are you?
I'm a Libra.
A Libra.
Uh-huh. 3rd of
Ascendant?
October, 1941.
What's your ascendant?
I have an Aries ascendant. So I have a Sun and Mars in Aries ascendant and a Pisces moon.
Yeah. Pisces moon.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. All of it is absolutely fascinating.
It is fascinating.
I'll have to read your numerology book.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love it.
Steve Jobs famously gave every attendee at his memorial service a copy of Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. What book would you want to give to people at your memorial service?
Well, probably the one that I'm wrapping up right now, because I consider myself a communicator. These aren't not my ideas, but to me they're right, and the world needs them right now. So I would say Earth School 101, a guidebook, is the one that I would put the most into. And then right after that would be the one about women, helping women understand who we really are, what
Yeah.
our gifts are, and how to utilize them.
Maybe you should take that book about women and add to it a whole other section about and for men, and then publish that.
Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ellae Elinwood, thank you so much for adding your 10 best list of most inspirational books to our library of recommendations.
It's
I
been
really
great.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
And your books are all available on Amazon. And if people want to learn more about you, give us the website name again.
The website name is connectionstoearth.net.
.net. Connections to Earth.
Actually, I don't think it's .net.
.com?
I think it's just .com. Yeah.
Connections.
Connectionstoearth.com.
.com. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been so much fun.
Good. Me too. So, from children's tales to esoteric texts, Ellae Elinwood's bookshelf is really a testament to a life lived in deep inquiry and quiet devotion. Her journey reminds us that guidance comes in many forms, and sometimes it arrives as a line in a book at exactly the right moment. If her list resonated with you, explore the titles, sit with them, let them open something new in you. After all, as Ellae shows us, our most profound teachers sometimes come wrapped in paper and ink. And if today's conversation sparks your curiosity, you'll love our other two shows, the Synergy Sessions, where leading edge thinkers come together in bold, unscripted dialogues that ignite new possibilities, and Between Realms and Reason, where we journey into the mysteries of consciousness, energy, the hidden layers of reality, and science converges with spirit in ways you've never imagined. That's it for this week. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and I'll be back at the same time next week with another 10 best interview for the No BS Spiritual Book Club. Till then, it's goodbye from me, and thank you again to Ellae Elinwood.